Madam Chair, ready when you are.
All right, let's go. 6:30. We can go. Madam Secretary, it's all on you.
I think she stepped away for 1 second.
No, she's there. Gina's there. She's just on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay. All right. And we are, sorry, my computer's acting up. First is the roll call. Vice President Suda.
Present.
Director Stanley.
Actually, you would do Director Zepeda, because he's the other one on the committee.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Director Zepeda.
Here.
Now we'll call the other director.
Director Stanley.
Director Stanley's on mute.
On mute, Director Stanley.
I'm trying to come in and fix it. No, she's not on mute. Director Stanley, can you hear me? I think I heard her say yes.
Let's just move
Okay.
on. Hello?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, the next thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance or observation of a moment of silence.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Number 2, approval of the agenda. Any member of the committee, board may request an agenda item be postponed, removed, or heard out of order. An item may not be added to the agenda unless it meets the requirements of an emergency situation as defined in Government Code Section 54956.5.
I make a motion to move the agenda.
Thank you. And I don't know what's going on with Director Stanley, but I'm going to second it. So moved, seconded.
And roll call would be Director Zepeda,
Yes.
Vice President Sudith,
Yes. And Director Stanley says she's here. Apparently we can't hear her.
and Director Stanley.
Yeah, but am I listening or am I just listening?
I can
or
hear
am
you.
I participating?
We can
now
now hear
No.
you.
I thought we decided that at committee meetings, only the members
Yes, that's
would
true.
talk.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then I will.
We just wanted to know that you were
I will
here.
take care of that.
We didn't know that we couldn't hear you.
I'm here and I'm listening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We just wanted to make
No.
sure. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Number 3 is public comment. I did not receive any public comments. Do you want me to still read the item?
No, we're fine. Thank you.
Okay, number 4 is the consent calendar. Matters on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be approved without discussion. Prior to approval of the consent calendar, a member of the committee/board may request that an item be removed for discussion. If a member of the public would like to speak to an item on the consent calendar, the member should email the board clerk and my email address prior to the committee/board taking action. If the meeting is a study session, the planning committee will recommend the consent items for approval at the next regular board meeting. Number A is minutes. Approve recommended board approval of the minutes of May 11th, 2020 Planning Committee meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I will second.
Thank you very much. Roll call. Vice President Sudeth
Yes.
and Director Zepeda.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next item, please.
Vice President, okay, thank you. 5A is a discussion about the proposed policy update, Board of Directors, policies and procedures.
Okay, so I wanted to, I did send out a little bit of information in advance, but I wanted to just give an update on where we were. We last met on the policy last month, and we made the changes that we discussed in that meeting. And then what you received for this meeting was a clean version of the policy with those changes. You have a red line version from the original, or I should say the current adopted policy. And then what we sent out I believe earlier today was a memo that provided some of the context on some of those changes, a little more explanation. And I also wanted to introduce Leah Costella, who is here, and she is an attorney with Burke, Williams, and Sorensen. She is part of the firm that we hired to work with us on doing an overhaul of all of our district policies. And she has worked with us as we have worked through some of the issues on this. She's done the legal review and also provided to us the sort of the best practices. So the version you see right now is the combination of staff recommendations, the ad hoc, I'm sorry, not the ad hoc, the planning committee, and actually the ad hoc that looked at this originally. So that's what you have in front of you at this point. And then Leah is really just here to answer any questions that that the board has, or staff can't answer those questions for you. So I just wanted to give that introduction. Leah's now up on the screen. So if you haven't seen her, and maybe just seen her name, there she is. And that's really it. So that's my intro.
Okay. So, hello, Miss Leah.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Let's start going through this.
Are we able to bring up, Justin or Gina, the new document on the screen?
Yeah, that would be great.
Give me a second. I'll be able to. Do you want to see the clean version, or just the, is that?
I'm imagining the clean because the red line is pretty messy.
Okay, give me a minute and I'll.
Yeah, it'll keep
well, is that okay?
me from going back and forth. Yeah, it'll keep me from
Okay.
going back and forth. Because right now I'm going back and forth between the screen.
Yeah, and then we have the bullet points too, and I'm trying to find my notes on it.
Thank you, Justin.
The memo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
And one of the issues we should discuss actually tonight, because it will change one of the sections, is that the board will need to decide if you're going to continue to use Robert's rules or Rosenberg's rules. And the way that it is currently written, it's been updated to reflect the process of Rosenberg's rules. And I do not know either of them well enough to speak about that, but Leah's definitely familiar. But that is a decision that you'll have to make, and that will change the change how the policy is written. And actually, it's referenced, I believe, in our ordinance. So we will need to modify the ordinance as well to reflect a change if that's what if that's what the board wants to do. Okay, so this is the clean version with all of the changes that have been incorporated.
And Lisa, if you don't mind, just
Please.
to provide a little bit of context, since this is the first time I've had the opportunity to meet y'all on this project that we've been working on for a while. So a number of months ago, Lisa had asked us to do kind of an overall revamp of all of the district's policies, both personnel, board policies, and a variety of others. Myself and my firm represent a total of 8 or 9 sanitary districts, and so we've done this exercise for a number of different clients. And the goal is really to kind of create a structure that makes it easier both for staff and for the board to really have a clear idea of what your responsibilities are, how meetings are conducted, how motions are brought to the table and considered, what are your financial best practices, et cetera. So with respect to the board policies, our primary objective was to take what you already had, much of which was already good and had a lot of good content, formatted in a way that made it a little bit easier to follow, to sort of break it into parts so that you can kind of go to a specific part and see, here's the responsibilities of the president, here's the responsibilities of the vice president, that sort of thing. And then in conjunction with staff and also comments made by this committee and the ad hoc committee, to make changes that we believe comport with best practices, that really allow for boards to function and really provide the best stewardship of the organization possible. And that's, as you may recall, we were going to do a training on some of this right before all of the COVID shutdowns happened, so that got extended and moved. But at some point, we will conduct that training, and that will go along with these board policies to sort of put into effect some of the things that are in the policies to really help the board do the best job they can do. And like I said, that's something we do routinely for our clients, and we do for ourselves too, so that we can all be the best stewards of the organizations we serve as possible.
Okay.
So how would you like to go about? Do you want to go by the different sections, or would you like to just talk about any of the specific things that concern you?
Let's go by section, and then also with the highlighted bullet points, because I don't think we'll have to go through every section, mostly the bullet points. Do we have?
You want to go through the memo? Do you want to
Yes.
talk about? Do you want to pull up the memo and then talk about each of those?
Well, and one
Okay.
thing, Lisa, if this would work, if you want to keep
Yep.
this up so you can see the most recent version of the policy, and then I have the memo up on my other screen, which is my phone,
Okay.
and we can just kind of talk through each one of those line items, because
That
I
would be
think it'll
great.
be most helpful for you all to see the actual policies. So the first thing, does that work? Does that sound like a good structure?
It does, because I also have the policies up on a different screen too, and I think having them both will be helpful to me, because I'm very visual that way.
So the first thing that you'll see that we did, very basic change, but wanted to highlight it, is we changed the name to make it clear that this wasn't just about meetings, that this is meant to be a broader document to apply to the board kind of across the board. That's the first bullet point. Again, small change, but does make a big difference. If you're a new board member and sort of looking at these policies, we want to make sure that you understand that this is meant to kind of govern your service and not just govern your participation in meetings.
Great.
The second, and again, similarly, there was in the original version a purpose and policy section. We combined those two sections into one and created a definition of policy that again clarifies that this document is meant to provide guidance for board members on their service as a board member, not just about sort of how you conduct yourself in meetings. That's obviously an important part of your role and responsibility, but your responsibilities are broader than that, and so we want these policies to be sort of a one-stop shopping for any existing or new board member to know and understand what their role is. So the next change, you will note that in the earlier version, we went straight into a quorum discussion. We had in the first version that you had seen in the last meeting, we had removed that quorum discussion, largely because, and this is one place where the requirements of a quorum are set by the government code, and so we removed them from the policy. But I think that in order to ensure that a board member could look at one document and sort of know what's required of them, you all wanted to add that back in. So we did go ahead and add that back in. I think that's a good idea. and we just moved it. So we moved it to, if you want to go back up, Justin, to the 2.1 section. We basically moved it to the second section because what we wanted to do was lead with 2.1, which we believe is one of the most important sections in the policy, which is to really lay out front and center what are the responsibilities of anyone who serves on the board. And so we moved the quorum section to 2.2. The content is the same. There are some differences just in format, but the content is the same. And then we moved the responsibility of the board section up to the lead section under board of directors. Again, the content is the same. There are a few changes in wording. I know 2.1.1, we changed that to governing. I changed 2.1.3 to developing the district's mission. And then 2.1.4 is directing district policies. Small changes, but ones that, again, kind of comport with best practices and really provide a new or existing board member with a very clear set of instructions on what their responsibilities are. So there's a lot in that 2.1 section, so I'll stop there before continuing on with the bullet points to see if there are any other questions or comments that you have about the way that's framed.
So we don't have the red line. Looking at it, I mean, I'm fine with it. I like it. I like the way it's worded. But so was this written this way before in 211, 217, 216? Was this written this way before? What wording?
It was in the earlier version. It was one large paragraph.
Okay.
And I believe there was like an A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so the content is the same. The format is a little bit different. And some of the words are a little bit different in order to provide what we believe to be clearer, more precise direction.
Okay, yeah, it's clear to me. My favorite word, clarity.
You and me both. I think
I'm a fan of the word too.
Yes, I like it. I mean, I like the way it reads. It's very clean. Lots of white space. Very clean.
Yeah, and honestly, one thing I kept joking with Lisa about, and we will do another very careful review of this once the committee has signed off on it, is that formatting for documents like this is actually really important. I mean, it's, you know, I will readily admit that I can get lost in the formatting. I don't like it when documents look messy, but the truth is, for a document like this that's meant to provide guidance to people, how it's formatted, how you visually see it on the page, really matters for how effective it is. And so that is one of the reasons there are so many format changes to the document. That's part of what makes the red line a mess, is that there's a ton of format changes, although the substance has not dramatically changed.
Yeah. I get it. I like it. Director Zepeda?
So I like this format. I worked, Leah, good to meet you. I worked on the ad hoc committee. And yes, lots of paragraphs, it was a mess. This looks very clean. This looks like a policy. I mean, I haven't even read the whole thing, but it just visually, it looks like it's a legal document. Policy tells you the steps. So I like this. On 2.17, in directing the general manager and general counsel, is there another spot somewhere else in this policy that talks about the general manager and the general counsel in our, as a board, our relationship with each one of them?
Yes, we'll get to that. But there's a specific section both for the general manager and for the general counsel that outlines their responsibilities, and that also tries to clarify the board's role with respect to interacting with both. So we'll go through that when we get to that. And that was in your existing policy. Again, though, what we tried to do is kind of pull it out into specific sentences with lots of spacing, so it's really clear. But we'll get to that once if you can, Justin, I keep asking you, because I try to move the document and I'm like, oh, I can't. It's not I don't have control. so if you can, we can go, I'm sorry.
Just tell me where and I'll move it.
Just go to let me see, what's the next one? We'll go to 2.3, but one change worth noting is that there was a section in here that was devoted to the district secretary. That has been removed, and now there's just a section for president and vice president. Again, that's pretty consistent with best practice. You had a policy that made it very complicated to sign and finalize documents, to sign and finalize resolutions. As your clerk or your secretary will tell you, you want to make it as simple as possible. Once you've had your meeting, made your motions, done what you do, then, the job sort of shifts to the clerk or to the secretary to make sure that everything is documented properly. And so the way that it was drafted before is that responsibility really lied with the secretary, but the secretary signed or had signing authority, but the president and vice president were the ones that also had signing authority. It just wasn't very clear. So we removed the secretary section, and then again, you'll see the president and the vice president section, which is 2.3 and 2.4, are substantively virtually identical to what they were in the earlier document, but just organized to make it very clear what the responsibilities are, how the chain of command works if the president isn't present, that kind of thing. I'm just looking. Yeah, so the specific thing in the memo, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at my phone because that's my second screen, is that this policy makes clear that the president signs all contracts unless the president is unavailable, and then the vice president signs all contracts, as opposed to putting that authority into the secretary, which is sort of inconsistent with other sections of the policy that give that authority to the president. So, but other than that, changes here are just formatting, really. Substantively, very similar to some small wording differences, but very similar to what is in your existing policies. Okay, so any questions on 2.3 or 2.4?
No.
So if we can scroll down, I believe that 2.4 is the last, and then we move to section 3. Or no, there's a 2.5.
2.5 and 2.6.
Okay, can I stop here on that section, because I made a change here. So the ad hoc had made a recommendation about a process essentially for the president, which was the vice president would automatically move to president. So the last discussion at the ad hoc was that wasn't necessarily the preferred recommendation. So I have removed it at the moment, and it just basically says that there will be a vote for the president. If you want us, when we bring this forward, depending on what the recommendation is, you can put that recommendation back in, but I just want to let you know I've removed it from this version because of the discussion based on the last time and the feedback I've received from other board members who were not necessarily in favor of that either, of having that automatic move to president from vice president. So I just wanted
to. The secession.
Exactly.
So it says here, it just says about the voting. So that's about the secession, the ad hoc.
Exactly.
Station. So
yeah,
Cesar, that was you guys' recommendation. You were on that ad hoc committee, you and Harry, right? You and Director Wiener. The thing about recommendations from committees is that it still has to go before the board for vote. And we changed the vote for the last election. And I was pretty adamant about that. And that's myself. But that's my personal. And I'm one of 5. And so that's and I don't believe in dipping my hands in somebody else's water. I get my hand in my own purse. But when a recommendation comes from a committee, as I believe even when a recommendation comes from this committee to the full board, I believe that the full board should take a look at a recommendation because we put in the work on the committee level for that reason. So I knew this was going to come up again because it came up at our last planning meeting. What is your recommendation? Because it came from your committee.
Well, and thank you for acknowledging that. I think that when the committees do work, I think it needs to be presented to the full board for them to say yes or no. I do see Lisa's point, but I think we need to present it. Or if anything is short, we need to figure out, because it was a big mess. The ad hoc committee was created for multiple purposes, and one of them was to especially look at this piece because of the last election. We were trying to figure out what was going to be the next step. Some people thought there was an ascension. Some people didn't think there was. So that way we have a little bit more guidance, whether we adopt it or not, or whether we continue moving with this one. Maybe it's figuring out, maybe the president, I mean, there's other ideas that we can go with. And Leah, maybe you've got some best practices from other agencies. I know, like,
it's a tough one. Because different agencies deal with it differently, frankly. There's not sort of a clear best practice. I will say what I have found to be from a practical standpoint, the smoothest practice is to have a policy that requires voting every year and then an informal recommendation. And so 2 of my agencies do this. There is a policy like this that requires voting every year. So there's no automatic secession included in the adopted policy of the board. But there is an informal policy that sort of establishes, so for one of my agencies, it's basically there are different committees that the president and vice president need to serve on before they are eligible for that position. And then there's kind of a recommendation and a schedule of anticipated secession. None of that is binding. It's something that the agency kind of adopts in a non-binding way just to create an expectation, but that the policy itself still calls for an election. So that's kind of what, because sometimes what happens is boards just don't really, sometimes there's a legitimate fight. 2 people want to be president and there's a real contest. Sometimes it's just that there's not kind of clarity about what the process has typically been or sort of what the practice of the agency has been. So like I said, what I have found is a policy that always allows for an election with sort of an informal understanding among board members that's kind of memorialized in a schedule that everyone has and that is talked about in an open meeting that people sort of know is out there, that tends to kind of smooth this issue over the most. But, all boards are different, personalities are different, relationships are different. So I can't say with certainty that that's the best choice for y'all, but that's what I've seen work the best.
And maybe what we can do, so we won't change this document, maybe we could leave it as is and then bring the note from the ad hoc committee and then saying, here's what the ad hoc committee presented. And then this is what the document originally says. And we just leave it like this, so we don't have to go back and change this one. Lisa, if you don't mind, if you can just add the other notes from the ad hoc committee as a bullet point on the other document or something.
Yeah, my thought was just like with the Roberts versus Rosenberg's rules is to present the policy as it's written and then say there are a couple of sections here which you have to pick an option A or B. And then whichever the board votes on, well, whichever option, then we would finalize that in the document. So I see we could do the same thing here. With the way that this is written, it just doesn't designate any type of process, right? It really just says that there's a vote. So it would be easy to then slide it in if there's this decision to do this, or we just leave it vague and you guys can have an informal or whatever. So, but my thought was basically for a couple sections to do, it's either option A or B and present it that way.
Perfect. I'm good with that then. Director said I think we can move forward from that.
Okay. All right, good. And it still leaves the option to make a recommendation. So I would just have your recommendation prepared.
Yeah, if we can do that, Lisa, as option A and option, I like that, option A, option B. It's sort of the what it is, maybe some staff recommendation, and then the recommendation from the ad hoc committee, and then whatever recommendation, so it might be more than option A and B, so we A, B, C, and C, and then maybe whatever recommendation comes from this committee, that way they can see, because again, and I happen to be on both committees now, but whatever work gets done in a committee, it's not sort of fair for those members. I spend hours with Harry. I like Harry, I'm not saying anything. But, we spend hours working on the policy, literally paragraph by paragraph, because there was lots of paragraphs. So I just want to make sure that the work gets acknowledged and the time gets acknowledged.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's clear.
That's simple enough to do, Lisa. I think that's a great idea.
Yep.
We can draft the document to literally say, option A, section 2.5, option B, section 2.5, and then when you have discussion at your board meeting about it, then you can frame the discussion around those options and then make a selection. And then when it's finalized, it'll be finalized with the option you choose.
Yes, I think that's fair too. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so the directors section, I'm just looking. Yeah, that's what was in your existing document. It just, I want to point out one thing about this section, and that's section 2.6.5. So this is a section we added, and to get to one of your questions, Director Cepeda, this is starting to begin to create some framework for how the directors manage their relationship with staff and with the general manager and the general counsel. And so what this section, and this is something, that I try hard to make sure is in every policy that I prepare for every board, particularly of a special district, and that is that questions or individual requests of staff be funneled through the general manager. Because it's very difficult when you have a culture where directors go straight to staff. Certainly you have a right to ask questions to staff, and you should, to make sure that you understand the issues that you're being asked to make decisions on. But this sort of assigns the first layer of that responsibility for that request to be made to the GM, so that the GM can then determine who is the best person amongst the staff to actually address your question. So anyway, so this section is formatted differently, but substantively the same as what was in your existing policy, with the addition of 2.6.5, which we actually moved from a different part of the policy, but that makes clear that directors should ask questions or make individual requests for information from staff through the general manager as opposed to directly.
Can I make a suggestion here? Because I'm still not clear from the way this is worded that I can't go directly to Justin and tell him what to do. Because
okay.
It says that I can't ask Lisa. And I think I just want it worded a little stronger.
Clearer language.
I want something like, unless otherwise directed.
Okay.
Directors, just like we have shall in almost every other one.
Sure.
Something like are expected to, or director shall make individual requests through the general manager, or directors are expected to, something like that, something a little stronger, so that we are not going to Jana and having her do our paperwork, and Lisa has no idea what's going on. I think it just needs to, unless otherwise directed, unless she told me to do it. Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I think you're right. The language can be stronger, and we can certainly revise to use stronger language to make it clear and clearer. And Director Cepeda, is that something that you would support as well? Kind of stronger language to convey the same message, but in a clearer, more direct way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, especially that bullet point, I think needs to have stronger language on that one. So I agree.
Okay.
All right.
Sometimes she tells us to go to them to help us with booking our trips or whatever. So that's
right.
directing us to use particular people as a resource. But I don't think it should be left up to us to make a determination to put work on people.
Okay. That sounds great, and I wholly support that. So we will revise that. I'll work with Lisa to make sure that the language reflects both best practices and also your practices, because you're right. There are going to be instances where you are told to go to the clerk to arrange for your attendance at CASA or whatever. And so we want to make sure that's also reflected in the policy. So, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I've got that note.
Anything
right,
else in the section, Director Zepeda? Are you good?
No, I'm good. The only, it's not really a question, but under 2.6.2, it says if you're not able to attend the meeting, she must notify the board president. Would it be the president and the chair? So if I can't make it to this meeting, do I contact our
Or
board?
the chair? Yeah, I
So
think that I think it should say or the chair.
And then,
You mean for committee meetings?
Yes.
So,
yeah, I wasn't sure if this
okay.
would,
Yeah.
if this would also be for committee meetings or not. I mean, I'm just nitpicking there, just.
No, I mean,
Being
that's,
advocate. And also, I just noticed there, before we do move out, if we can make this a little bit more gender neutral, instead of he, she, just say
you know
direct,
what,
notify the board president. So removing the he and she's and just saying director.
and my apologies. That's one of this got a little rushed at the end. We've tried to be careful about the gender neutral language, but we will do another pass to make sure that that's out. What we have done is he, she, they, as kind of as what I believe to be kind of the preferred approach in legal documents. If that's acceptable, we'll just make sure that all of it is he, she, they, or would you prefer that we just try to leave out the pronouns entirely?
If we could just leave them out, because if you can just say there, director must notify the board president. If a director is unable to attend a meeting, must.
The director.
I think when we can use a title versus a pronoun, that would be the preferred.
Yeah, it's fine.
I think we actually have tried to do that for the most part.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, no, we've worked on that, but like lots of things, that's definitely a work in progress. But we will continue to go through this as we finalize it to catch those instances where we have either not reused the description or we've, in this instance, just used gendered language. So, okay, so we're going to leave out pronouns for 2.6.2, and we're also going to clarify responsibility of informing the chair if you can't attend a committee meeting.
And pronouns will all throughout the document, and not just 2.2. If we can do the whole document, please.
Yeah.
No, understood. What I'm going to try to do is a note where we have not done it. Because you'll see there are sections where we have done it, so I'm just trying to note where we haven't done it to make sure that I know exactly where to go to so we don't keep having the same mistakes.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, Ms. Leah. Appreciate it.
Okay.
We're good on 2.6.
Sorry, and I know you see me using my phone, but that is me taking notes, not.
No problem.
I guess you can't see my phone; it's kind of below the screen. So.
I do the same thing. I do the same thing. So I think we're good. So we're on 3 now.
All right. So yeah. So now we're on section 3, which is the board attorney. And this again, it's similar to what is in your existing document. It just clarifies. Some just by formatting, by kind of breaking the paragraph up into specific sections. Justin, if you could scroll down a little bit.
I did want to note that we have changed the name in this version. There was a recommendation to use general counsel versus board attorney, which is more of a commonly used term now.
Yes.
So you'll see that change.
I noticed that. Yeah, okay. I noticed it right away. Yes.
So one item I wanted to bring up, so this is a change that I believe we had taken out and then you guys had added, you people had, see, gender neutral language, I work on it, but the guys gets me every time. You all had asked that it's 3.3.4, which is that directors may individually contact the general counsel to research an issue. One thing that I tend to recommend to my clients is that there be some limit, especially if you have, as you do, an outside general counsel who is billing by the hour. You just want to make sure that no individual director can sort of assign a task that will cost the district a substantial amount of money without having the entire board have the opportunity to ensure that they want that done. So I would recommend that we perhaps revise that language. Certainly for small things, it's totally appropriate for for directors to go directly to the general counsel. But you might want to consider some clarification about, if the question is anticipated to take more than 5 hours of research time or something like that, then it should go to the board or go to the general manager, because what you don't want to do is have a situation, and I have seen this happen more in cities, frankly, than in special districts, but where one member of the elected body can really utilize a lot of legal resources without the rest of the elected body having an opportunity to determine if that's how they want to prioritize the work. So again, I raise that, it's up to you, but it's just something I wanted to point out and get your perspective on.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned it, because 3.3.3 and 3.3.4 were two of the ones that I really wanted to talk about. The same way I wanted to talk about 2.6.5, because I think that those two probably stick in my craw the most, because meant as the general counsel is meant as the general counsel for the entire district, not for any one particular director or any set of particular people. And so corralling that bill, and it's not even just the money, because we are supposed to be good stewards of the public money. Yeah, I'm gonna need some help on this best practice for that, because that, I think, we need a best practice around that, because 3.3.4 is you shouldn't just be picking up the phone to ask a question. We should be asking in either closed session, so that we all may have that same question. Are we all
right
to that same?
Well, so there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can just take the section out entirely, and then kind of deal with it on a basis of when it comes up. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. You could try to roll it into your requirements for agendizing an item, that in order to ensure that if there is a legal issue that because you can only go into closed session on very specific things. Just wanting your general counsel to look into a legal issue, that's not necessarily, rarely is that appropriate for a closed session. That's something that should come up in, so for example, for one of my clients, they have a long-standing solar agreement, and so they want me to look at that and evaluate it, and that's a big project, takes a lot of time. So the way that it works is one of the directors, when asked for, are there any new agenda items that you want to have on the agenda, will sort of say, I want to have a report on the status of our existing agreement or something like that. So I think the best practice is to roll up the director's ability to ask for your general counsel to do research into the section that allows for directors to ask that items be put on the agenda. I do think, though, that you want to preserve some ability for directors to ask, to ask some questions to the general counsel without going to the whole board. For example, conflict questions. I mean, I want my boards to come to me directly if they have a question about a conflict. I don't want to have to wait for that to be agendized. I really want them to feel free to come to me directly. Small questions about Brown Act questions, stuff like that. So it's a little tough, because you do want to create some discretion for a director to go to the GC with small items, but you don't want that to become such a practice that you don't have the rest of the board considering direction that's being given to do substantive research on something. We can work with the language for 3.3.4, and like I said, maybe try to revise some of the agenda language to reflect that, but I guess that the short answer after my very long answer is there is not sort of an easy best practice here, frankly, because some of it is just based on good faith from your directors.
Can I ask about 3.3.2?
Sure.
So the general counsel may attend board of director meetings and may advise the board during closed sessions pursuant to the Brown Act. Do we want to put anything in here that the general counsel attends or does not attend or may attend standing committee meetings like this one?
Sure.
Go ahead, Leah.
Oh, I was going to say, at the request of who? Would it be your preference that they always attend, or at the request of the committee chair?
And that's where I want some clarifications. So that way the general counsel doesn't just randomly show up.
It's at the
Today's-
request of the chair. It's
It
at the
was a
request.
slow month, so they need to get some hours. And then just start showing up to all the meetings that we're putting together, unless we want them, right? If we want them, then
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I would say at the direction, honestly, I would say at the direction of the GM.
Yeah.
Because the agenda for each committee is largely going to be driven by your staff. So they're going to know, I mean, your GM or whomever, your finance director, your engineering, they're going to know if the issue that's being addressed by a committee is something that you want the attorney there for or not. So my recommendation is that the president, and maybe you could say either or, just to give the chair some discretion too, but that they attend committee meetings at the request of either the committee chair or the general manager.
I can go with that.
So we're gonna add that verbiage on just so that way it's not just, because if we're talking about limiting the hours or the pay, is mostly, for me, is mostly the pay of employees or anybody else. And I think later in the process here, so people don't just show up, I need some overtime, I'm gonna show up to this special committee just because. So that way
And here's what I'll do, because I think that I'll basically add a new section in between 3.3.2 and 3.3.3 that clarifies that other than board of director meetings and closed sessions, that the presence of the general counsel is at either the direction of the committee chair or the GM. So that there's so I think that will get at what you're looking for. And it is important that your general counsel be at the board of director meetings, and it's also important that they be at closed sessions. Every now and then you don't need to be at a closed session, but I know I like to always be at closed sessions for my clients because I want to make sure that the closed session is valid. Okay, so.
Leah, could we clarify that to say a regular board meetings as opposed to special? Because like strategic planning doesn't have a legal need for the attorney, that type, but that could be a special,
you're right.
like a work session.
Budget meetings. I mean, yes. So what I will do is I'll revise it to say the general counsel shall attend regularly scheduled board of director meetings and closed sessions, and duly called closed sessions. And then we'll add a 3.3.3 that says the general counsel, the general counsel may attend special meetings or committee meetings or
workshops.
There might,
such other meetings.
Other meetings, because there's always other stuff, right?
Yeah. Such other meetings as requested by the GM or board chair, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand what you're getting at, so I just need to play with the language a little bit, but.
We know you have it. I'm still stuck on 3.3.4 though.
No, I know. I wish I had a good and easy, succinct answer
I need
for you
something.
on that.
I need something, Leah. Help me. I need something. I just don't think.
Maybe the answer is to say, is that the directors may individually contact the general counsel on legal issues. Maybe what we can do is just be specific on legal issues pertaining to conflicts of interest, Brown Act concerns. I mean, there's probably a few others. I want to think about that a little bit. And put that there. And since this isn't the director, and then maybe take out the rest of it, and in the director responsibility section, add another, just like there's that section that says directors need to go through the GM before, they add another section to the director section that says that directors need to go through, they need to go to the entire board before directing their general counsel to, to engage in substantial research or something like that.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. I'm good.
Okay. Sorry. Let me just take some notes so I make sure I get everybody's.
Something like that. Director Zepeda,
you tracking with me?
Yes, I like that. And then as soon as Leah's done writing, I was going to say something else, but I don't want to add more until she finishes writing.
Okay. Okay.
Hold on. Yeah, sorry. And typing on my phone is not the fastest thing.
No worries.
I still rue the day when they got rid of the BlackBerry that actually had like a real keyboard. I know I age myself, but I loved that keyboard.
There's still BlackBerries out there.
I know, but they have no apps. So
Well, we're gonna have to
decide.
You want the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
Justin, would you mind going to 3.1? I just want to read that again, or the very top of this segment or section. So I also want to make sure that this is just because the general counsel serves at the pleasure of and receives direction from the whole board.
Yeah.
This is anything about the GM, because there's correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought there's also a sort of a dotted line to the GM, right? The board reports to us, and we have a chunk of that person, but then for general, because they're general counsel, for the rest of the agency, they go to the GM. So I want to make sure that either do we capture this here? I want to make sure that somebody can't come back and say, you know, Lisa can't use the general counsel because this is ours only. I want to make sure that we have something there.
And so some of that is in the responsibilities of the general manager. I would hesitate to change this language because this is an important legal concept that is very much a best practice, so that everybody understands that the board and that it is the board as a whole, and maybe the way to reframe this, because the general counsel represents the district, and as the representative of the district, they take their direction from the board directly. That being said, as a practical matter, your general counsel and your general manager need to work as a team to accomplish the kind of day-to-day activities of the district. And so, but it is true that the general counsel is hired by the board, they are fired by the board, and it is the one position where that is true. Unlike all of the other positions where they are hired and fired by the GM, the GC is hired and fired by the board. And that's a sort of a legal arrangement that we need to make sure is enshrined in these policies. What we've tried to do in the section on the general manager's responsibilities is to put some, and we've added a whole section on the general manager's responsibilities. All of that language is new, and that is about what you're talking about, sort of making it clear that the general manager also has the ability to direct the general counsel, because they have to. So anyway, I can. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say, could you just keep 3.1 and add 3.2, sort of a separate sentence that speaks to the GM role, like the relationship with the GM there, and then it's more extensive in the general manager. But then if you're looking at the general counsel section, it speaks to what Director Zepeda is referring to.
Okay.
Just kind of, it doesn't take away from 3.1, but it provides the clarity in that section that he's talking about, and then it's reinforced in the general manager section. Would that work?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's fine. So basically we'd insert between 3.1 and 3.2 a new 3.2 that basically says, you know, while the general counsel, you know, serves, you know, represents the district and serves at the discretion of the board, you know, they are charged with working with and cooperating with the general, something like that. I mean, just something that clarifies that really the GM and the GC are meant to work together as a team. They're not meant to be sort of two separate arms of the agency, both reporting separately to the board without connection between the two. I want to think about the language around that, but I think some language around that we can certainly add in.
And Leah, may I ask another question here? As we're creating this, right, I'm not sure when this is coming in, forward into the board, but if any of this language is different than what may currently be, and I have not read the agreement with our current council, but if the language here is different than what the general counsel's language contract is, Does this supersede that legal language contract?
I don't want to advise you on on your existing contract with your general counsel because I haven't read it. I will say generally I would be very surprised when I think about what my contracts say with my clients. They are very general. They definitely will say this first thing that all of my contracts make clear that the board hires and fires me. But I doubt there's anything in it that would be inconsistent with the idea that Lisa's suggesting, that the two entities kind of work together as a team, to best represent the ratepayers of the district or something like that. Because frankly, that's the fiduciary and legal responsibility of everyone that is hired by the district. So.
I don't believe there's anything that would be in conflict in the current agreement. I haven't seen anything that would be in conflict with that, or would be in conflict with what the practice is.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I'm just making sure all of my notes are clear before we move on. And this is 3 point, okay, all right. So I think we've got, so that's, I think those changes I understand. And one thing, I'm gonna use this draft as opposed to your original draft. I'm gonna use this draft to redline these changes. Well, I guess we should talk about that because this is one of the document management challenges, frankly, is that because the entire board hasn't seen the evolution of changes, to some extent, it makes sense to run a red line against the existing policies. But that red line starts to get, maybe we'll just do what we did this time around. We'll run a red line against the existing policies and then have this summary document that explains the difference, but we will add in these issues that we've talked about in this meeting. Does that work for y'all?
Yeah, I think just when I explained to Lisa, I think just the bullet points.
Yeah, okay.
Will work because you're not going to get a true red line.
Yeah, no, at this point, you're right. It's impossible. And
yeah.
Trying to get it has, let's just say that's been its own challenge. But okay, all right. So I think anything else on the general counsel's role? Okay, so if we want to go down to 3.4, I'm sorry, section 4. So this is all new. Yeah. This was out of the last meeting. There was a note in the draft that said, let's clarify the general manager's responsibilities. So this is kind of drawn from similar documents that we have for other agencies and then kind of vetted with Lisa to make sure that it comports with kind of her understanding of her role and her contract. That's kind of generally, but this is news. And you'll see 4.2.2, that's the issue that you had raised, Director Cepeda, about her role with respect to the general counsel. Anyway, I don't know if you have any questions or comments about this. Like I said, this is all new language, but it is new language that I think is drawn from very well vetted documents, and also I think that has kind of Lisa's kind of stamp of this is consistent with what she understands to be her role.
Leah, I would say though 4.2.2, as I read it now, wouldn't really address what Director Cepeda was talking about as I read it. So I think perhaps putting the language we talked about under general counsel and then maybe something very similar back over here, because this, to me, that section really just speaks to kind of risk and reporting risk or reporting any situations and then working with legal counsel versus the other situation. I don't know, that's my read on that.
No, I think you're right. So what we would do is add a section that says that one of the roles and responsibilities of the general manager is to direct the general counsel to perform legal research as necessary, to manage and to kind of manage legal issues or legal risk of the district, something like that.
Yeah, that might.
Okay, does that language sound okay to you, directors?
It does, yeah. Because I just want to make sure that we tied, she's the dotted line to Lisa or to the GM, right? And just being generic.
Okay, all right, easy enough. Anything else on section 4?
The 4.2.1, finalizing the agenda. What if Lisa gets sick or something? Is she gonna come out of her sick bed and?
Well, that's the unless excused part.
Okay.
And I mean, and some of this is just as a practical, I mean, your odds are you're going to have very few meetings that go forward without your GM. If it's a really critical meeting, the assistant, and certainly the.
That's why we have a deputy.
Yeah.
Perfect. So make sure I don't want to tie
if she's
Lisa
really
out
out of
with-
pocket, I mean, typically
Okay.
the way it works is if she is really out of pocket, yes, someone is assigned to be the GM in her absence.
Okay.
And so all of this would apply to that person.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Leah, just for clarification, I believe my understanding is too that I can designate under my authority different roles and responsibilities as needed. I mean, obviously, in reality, if I was going to miss a board meeting, I would be letting the board know this, and I would be saying, either the deputy or another department head if the deputy wasn't there. But I believe that's already in my general manager authority to designate someone else to do certain things if I'm not available.
Yeah, we should confirm that it's in this document because I didn't think about that, but you are correct. I mean, the typical practice is that the general manager has the authority to assign an interim general manager when they are unavailable.
You can just say, or designee.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I
Just
think
say
in the GM resolution has all of that kind of thing. Like I have the ability to designate someone else to sign an agreement on my behalf or things like that. I know those things already exist, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Justin, if you could scroll down a little bit. I think there might be a catch-all in here.
Yeah, it is 4.2.6.
Yeah, right. So I that's kind of meant to capture some of this stuff that's in that document, but maybe not specifically here, just because you don't want to repeat your general manager has a lot of responsibility. So this is also, you will note the 4.2.5 A and B. This is kind of meant to be the second part of the portion of the document that says directors go to the GM, not to staff. So it's like directors go to the GM, and then here's what the GM does when the director goes to the GM. When you ask or make an individual request, they'll assign staff, they'll report, etc. So just to kind of close the loop on that process.
There you go. That's the one I was looking for.
Okay, any other questions on the responsibilities of the general manager? So we will add into this section language about directing your general counsel as needed, and we'll also add in a specific section about assigning a designee. That is in your contract, but probably good to have it in the policies just so that the board understands that that is what happens in the event that you are unavailable for illness or a vacation or whatever. So,
Director Zepeda, did you read B?
Yes.
B? That's what I was looking for. So I'm satisfied. Okay, good. Because that's what should happen, Leah.
yeah.
425B is also what should happen under general counsel.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, look, there it is. It's right there.
Okay.
We can just use that same language.
That's what I was looking for under
Yeah.
general counsel. So something similar to that, if we can assuage that language under
Yeah.
general counsel, that will be very.
Now, is there any, so I'm just thinking of something happens, like I'm not going to use Lisa as an example, but maybe the former GM, right? Something happens where the board says, okay, we have to get some legal guidance. We might not be able to agendize it if we see problems with the GM that the board has to meet. Can we confer with the legal counsel without breaking this rule?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
the president can call an emergency meeting.
Yeah, and the president can always ask that your legal counsel be present at that meeting. And that, and again, I've seen this happen, where there is an issue with the GM or the city manager. The council calls an emergency meeting. They direct the general counsel or the city attorney to show up, and then the meeting is about it is basically a personnel evaluation. So certainly that is an option, right? The board always has the option of the chair or the president can call a special meeting to discuss a personnel issue in closed session. and can request that your general counsel be present. Yeah, so.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. All right, so the next section, section 5, this again comports with what you already have. So Lisa, interestingly enough, when I kind of went down the rabbit hole a little bit on the differences between Rosenberg's and Roberts' Rules of Order, process-wise, they're just not that different. Like, I mean, Rosenberg's is clearer. I mean, it's definitely, it just doesn't use the same, the language is clearer, but the process is really not that different. Also, and I hesitate to admit this because it shows, but the way that we've done this doesn't comport with either one of them. We're going to have to make a change because there's one step of the process that just doesn't comport with either Rosenberg's or Roberts. I have notes on it that I can't pull up at the moment. It's a small thing, but we're going to make that change anyway. So as a practical matter, this document does say you're going to comport with Rosenberg's. That is inconsistent with your current, with an ordinance that's been enacted by the district. So if you want to keep that in, we will need to revoke that ordinance. But as a functional matter, I don't think there's a huge substantive difference between Rosenberg's and Roberts. People have different opinions about this, but really I kind of went into the weeds and looked at each of the, and I'm like, it's kind of the same. So anyway.
So Leah, let me give you some background on how Rosenberg's even came to be part of the vocabulary that we're using on this document here. Our current general counsel, because a lot of the board wasn't as
astute.
Thank you. As astute, I was looking for the nice word. As astute to Robert's rules, the general counsel said we should move to a small group Robert's rules. And maybe instead of that, adopt Rosenberg's because it's a lot easier with a small gathering like we do of 5. To me, when I've read them, small group, large group, Rosenberg's, anybody's, the general thought and process is the same. How you make a motion, and I think the board before was getting stuck in emotions. They don't, all of a sudden I'm having a conversation and I was like, oh, that was a motion. Well, that was a motion. You have to follow the process. And then did you make a motion in a second? Did you vote on it? Did you have discussion on it? So people were stuck with the process, and that's why the Rosenberg's was brought up as potentially being easier to administer.
So here's what I would recommend, frankly. I think that, and I'm trying to find this email. I'm not going to pull it up right away. That explains it. I just don't think you should reference either Rosenberg's or Roberts. You have a very detailed description of the process. So Justin, if you can scroll up a little bit, this 5.3, I need to make a small change to 5.3 that has to do with the discussion versus the motion. I think technically that, scroll down a little bit. There's discussion after the motion too. And then there's also some rules about if there's a second on the motion and whether you can amend the motion. So there are some additional criteria here, but there's really good guidance from PLI, the Practicing Law Institute, that just kind of, what I would recommend is that we just take from the PLI materials, and this is what I use for training all the time, the process that they use, which is a very clear explanation that's easy to understand for small meetings and for directors who are new to the process, new to meeting management, etc., and just insert that into this document specifically. So that it's not Rosenberg's or Roberts, it's just here's the clear, easy to understand process for who does what in your meeting, and then just don't even get kind of lost in this. Because once you refer to a document, and again, this is a best practice, it becomes a tool, it becomes ammunition for somebody who's just kind of annoyed that things didn't go the way they wanted. So what I would suggest is that you remove any outside description and just put very clearly in here exactly how you deal with it, which is kind of what's there now. But I think that, like I was looking at these PLI documents that I just feel like are more user-friendly. And they cover some of these other things that are not covered here, which is, can you make like this can become an issue. Somebody makes a motion and then someone amends the motion. Do you take the vote on the motion first or the amended motion first? And you take the vote on the amended motion first, which makes the amended motion kind of a powerful tool. That's not really addressed here, so I want to add some language about that too. So anyway, that would be my suggestion. Jettison the Rosenberg-Roberts thing and just beef up the description of process in the policies.
Yeah, so if we beef it up, I'm good with that. Just something to give a little bit more direction, because there was a point again that, you know, the board will make a quasi something, and then I would challenge part of it, and then look at the general counsel, and be like, oh, that could work too. It's like, no, there's no gray areas. It's either yes or no, and you have to back up. If we're using Roberts, we use Roberts. It's like, yeah, we use Roberts small group. So I like that either we remove it, that we're not using Roberts, because you are correct. If someone knows how to use Roberts correctly, and that's ammunition, and you know how, and you can pull up everything. Yes, right, Cheryl?
I've
seen many people pull up the how to do it, and you challenge something, and you kill emotion before it ever became anything.
Yeah.
And you know, those tools matter. I mean, and I don't want to downplay the importance of what we all do. I mean, I represent a lot of sanitary districts. I think what they do, you know, I've said before, I think that the solution to the water crisis across the country lies with sanitary districts. I mean, I think what we do is super important, but what we do is limited. I mean, sanitary districts don't have the range of authority that cities have, that counties have. And so when you just don't want to invite that kind of politicking around providing sewer service. And because ultimately that's your charge. And it's an important charge. I mean, you know, with all of us staying in our homes all the time, I think everyone may appreciate exactly how important a charge it is. But anyway, so why don't I do this, again, if this is acceptable to y'all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take from these other materials that have been developed, the ones that I'm most, there's two, there's the Institute for Local Government and the Practicing Law Institute. I can't remember which of the ones I like the best. It might be the ILG ones actually, but they have they have a flyer that's just, here's how you manage a meeting. And they go like step 1, step 2, step 3. It's one page, so it's not like it's going to take up 5 pages of your policy, but it's super specific and easy to understand. Just move that into this document and then remove reference to Rosenberg's or Roberts so that this document becomes the Bible, right? I mean, you know, or, you know, this becomes the authority, the document that we turn to mediate conflicts about how the process should go, as opposed to someone pulling out their little Roberts manual, which I just think practically is, once you're there, it's never good.
Yeah, and it's just, I haven't read the what you're talking about. So as long as we ask someone to be able to make friendly amendments, because the board likes that too, and be able to make other, you know, additional motions.
To make some
It might just be training for the full board on how to run a meeting and make motions. But
I absolutely agree, and I think that I mean, for one of the sanitary districts that I represent, that was really one of the first things we did.
Someone's getting some feedback.
Whoa, it sounds like a typewriter. I didn't
know. It sounds like it stopped.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know that Lisa jumped off.
I think she just turned her video off for a minute.
Oh, okay.
She's still there. Yeah.
Okay,
I had to put some lip balm on.
Just want to make sure that you were there. We're not talking things about you that you're not there. All right, perfect.
I'm here.
Okay, so that'll be something that I kind of highlight in the bullet point document that shows the differences, but that will be the plan, to remove reference to Rosenberg's or Roberts and just put the robust language about how you work through motions, etc., in your board policies. And just so I think the ultimate goal of this project is to do a training on these policies once they've been adopted, and that would include things like how to effectively manage the relationship with your GM, how to not overburden staff with questions that may not be as high priority as other stuff they're doing, how to handle a meeting in a way that's efficient and that allows the meeting to happen quickly, and everybody to kind of get home at a reasonable hour but still get all the work done. So that is something we are going to do as kind of the last item on this project that we're handling for the district, which is to do a training on this. So
Leah, can you share how long are Union Sands meetings?
they are rarely over 30 minutes.
Union Sanitary.
They have 90,000 connections.
Yeah.
Vallejo Flood and Wastewater, which is another one of our clients, they're, that's a little different because their board is also the city council for Vallejo. 30 minutes, 20 minutes tops. Iron House, which is another one that I cover on the regular, they could sometimes go an hour and a half. We've been working on that.
Leah, for some of that, are you able to look at our template for agenda? Because I think some of that there leaves a lot of space to say, tell me about your day. We have an agenda item about that. Tell me about your week. Tell me what you've done for the past month.
You shouldn't have those agenda items. I will say one thing, and this is a change that we built.
Wait a minute. Did you say 30 minutes?
What?
30 minutes, yeah. And that's for a district. That's for a district with 90,000 connections.
No, 30?
30.
Yep. 3 zeros or 3 tens.
A committee meeting or regular meeting?
Regular meeting. They meet twice a month. Meetings are rarely. We did a rate hearing a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago with public comment, pretty substantial public comment. And we were out of there in a little over an hour.
I'm feeling a little bit cheated here. So
look, I mean, this is. You can get there, I promise you. And one of the tools that this policy is meant to give you is you really have to revise what you can put on consent. Because
you probably shouldn't have said this. You probably shouldn't have said this to me. About 30 meetings in about 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. So this is not something that I should hear right now.
FYI, we're almost at 2 hours on this meeting, so just FYI.
Yeah, right. Are we really? God, you're right. No,
an hour 15.
6:30. I was going to wait a second.
We're doing the upfront work so that going forward we have all the tools needed to run super efficient meetings.
Yes.
Okay, way to put some shine on it, Lisa. Way to put some shine.
And now you've incentivized me to move faster. I'm going to start talking even faster. So
shine on it. I'm good with it. I like it.
And we are pretty close to done. I mean, some of the end stuff is not. Most of the really substantive stuff we've dealt with.
No, we got productive. There's some production going on. I like it. Okay.
Okay. So 5.4 is the future agenda item section. Again, this is what was in your existing policies. I think that the language here is good. It really does kind of establish a process by which agenda items are placed onto a future agenda, and kind of ensures that this is best practice. It kind of models what we do in other districts. And so, again, if you have thoughts about it or want to change it, but I feel generally good about the way that this is drafted. I think that this is a good way to address future agenda items.
So
I have 11 days. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
No, well, I was just going to ask on this one because it relates to the example that you gave earlier about this. You were saying something about if a director said, oh, I want to do the solar agreement, for example, but put that on a future agenda. So is the process in that situation, what if it's only one director that wants that information? Do you then have a process whereby the board has to vote for those items, or is it just because they put it on the agenda? Because them asking to put it on the agenda in that way doesn't mean that any of the other board members are interested or want to do that.
Well, and I actually think Director Sudduth had a better way of dealing with that, which is Justin, if you can go back to the section in the GM responsibilities. So that was in the context of like when a director asks the general counsel to do something. We'll stop right there. So,
okay.
So I think what we're going to try to do is basically model this. So basically in the director section, say, if the director has a request for the general counsel, I have to sort of think about how that's going to function, but we're going to try to use language like this, that might go to the GM, right? And then But using this as the way to address that, not the future agenda item.
Okay, gotcha.
I think that's a better way of doing it. So, okay.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. But so why 11 days?
That is a
I
request of
just wanted to know.
staff. I think it probably has to do with the preparation of the agenda.
Yeah, but
we
why
have-
11?
Because we
Why
have to post, what is it? We post on the Friday before the meeting, which means we are finalizing the agenda. We backed into that date. Justin, you're on mute too if you're talking, just so you know.
There we go. Yeah, we came up with that. Essentially what you just said, Lisa, is to give us sufficient time to prepare it, because, we're thinking of it like today we're preparing the next week's meeting. So we're 8-9 days ahead, and that gives us sufficient time as staff to prepare staff reports and has that reviewed so it can be placed on the agenda and published when we need it to be.
So
Why not 15? I'm just wondering why 11.
That was the minimum. We could always add more days.
You know, to be honest with you, to be honest with you, maybe actually, because what this is really requesting is a request for the agenda item versus the actual agenda item itself. So maybe what we need to do is, as opposed to have the day, maybe we have to say it's in enough time that we can add it, because it would be like, I want to put for the future agenda, look into the solar agreement and discuss that. They're not saying we need a staff report that outlines that yet. So maybe we can't change that date, if I'm understanding the intent of that.
So Lisa,
Go ahead.
I'm confused. If I can just.
Yeah.
So, because a request for a future agenda item usually happens on the spot. Like, we're talking about something throughout the meeting and we're like, oh, you know what? In the future agenda item, I want to talk about purple trees. This is saying that now we're agendizing that agenda item.
I think it happens in two ways. It does happen in practice like that, what you're talking about, but it also happens sometimes where I will get a request from board members individually, and they'll ask that something be added to the future agenda. It doesn't happen all the time like that. It happens more frequently where you guys are talking and it comes up in a meeting, but there are times that I will get it as well.
And this is a procedure we use in Union Sand too, which is that, so the first way that agenda items come up is at the meeting. There's an item on the agenda that says new agenda items, and then somebody from the board says, I want to talk about X, and if 3 people agree, then it goes on an agenda for either the next meeting or the meeting after. But directors can and often do go directly to the GM, and so what you want to do is not have that be a way to avoid getting 3 votes at the meeting. And so that's why this process is there, so that if they request the GM put something on an agenda, then the GM puts the request on the agenda, but you still need to get the 3 votes in order for that to be something that staff prepares the staff report for, and does kind of substantive work on. Again, it's sort of an effort to control one director making a decision about using district resources without getting kind of buy-in from other board members.
So we technically don't need 11 days because the staff is not making any work.
Yeah, I think we can say before we finalize the agenda for publishing, just something like that, since it's just the request versus the actual item.
And then in 5.4.1, it says any directors may request to have an item placed in future agenda items, yada, yada, yada. Should it read more into to say any director should, and I don't know the proper wording, but should make a motion? Because this is a motion. We don't just make a request, right? You have to make it in the form of a motion, isn't it? Or are they just requests?
Typically, it's just a request. You don't have to have a motion on this.
How does that process then work to get the 3 votes? If you don't have a first and a second, so I just randomly can say something, and then now how are they going to call for? So process-wise, Robert's rules or no Robert's rules, what rules are we going to use?
Right. No, and again, to be frank, that when this for my other districts, it's usually someone says, I want this on the agenda, and everyone else on the dais says, yep, that sounds good. But you're right, it's probably better to create a process around it. So, so we can revise the language to say a director, may identify an item to place on a future agenda, make a motion there too, and if the motion passes, then it will go on a future agenda. Something along those lines, but okay.
Something like that. So here's what we've done. Two things that I have seen. People just say, oh, future agenda item. I want to talk about ABC in a future agenda item. And then it goes into a list somewhere, and it may never come back to a future agenda item because I don't know how this get pulled back in, right? So they go into somewhere. I've learned that. So what I do, I make motions.
Yeah.
I want this, but also something important that I've learned working with Lisa is ahead of time, I'll say, hey, Lisa, I'm thinking about making this agenda item. When can you think you can work on it?
Yeah.
So I don't just say, I want this agenda item be put in next meeting, and staff's going to need 2 or 3 months to work on it. It's not going to be enough time. So some wording that says placing a future agenda item, but also working with GM. And again, I don't know what the wording is. Working with the GM to come up with a fair and good time frame.
Okay, so hold on. But that is what the planning committee is supposed to be for. We are supposed to be working that out, because what we don't want happening, and this is what I'm opposed to, is that each of the 5 of us are going to her with all of these ideas separately. Hey, I want these on the agenda. You know what? I want these on the agenda. Or typing to her and telling her these things, and then she has to figure it out. We are supposed to be trying to help ferret that out and come up with these suggestions based on what may have been presented at the general board meeting, or what we think based on what we're talking about, and then we're presenting that as possible agenda items. But that's what the planning committee is supposed to be trying to plan.
So how about this as a way to accomplish both those goals? So why don't we amend 5.4.1 or revise it to make it subject to a motion, and then if the motion passes, say that the timing for the agenda item will be determined by the planning committee.
Yes, but I would like to take out that part about the board members going directly to the general manager.
Yeah, you really, I mean, that's a tough one, because they should be able to do that. I mean, we can take it out.
Not all requests are the same, right? So some things are very simple things, and I will say that having the conversation with the board member usually allows me to understand what it is they're trying to achieve, and sometimes it ends up not even needing to be an item like that. So I wouldn't necessarily, and the other thing that's hard for us as staff is that if there isn't a motion, then it's really one person giving us direction, and we're like, are we supposed to do something with that? Because I can't take direction from one person. So it goes on this list, but there's no motion, so it's really just one person who told us to do something, which I can't do. Yep. So so I don't know if Leah, you can kind of word around it. I don't have a problem. I actually prefer that the directors come to me, because if it's a bigger, I can give some context to the request. Like, oh, that's going to be a significant item, or that's something we could do quickly. And maybe if it's a significant item, then what I could do is direct it back to the planning committee.
Well, so here's 2 questions. So we could add something into 5.4.2 that lets that item go on an agenda at the GM's discretion. Because as a practical matter, you set the agenda, right? I mean, it's so if it's something that you are in accord as an agenda item, then you don't necessarily, it doesn't need to be something you're directed to do, right? That's just part of your overall responsibilities. So perhaps what we can do is add into 5.4.2 the discretion for you to make that determination, or for you to put it on a future agenda as a future agenda item for consideration, then same motion language that we're going to add to 5.4.1. So this would cover anything controversial, right? Any sort of pet project of a board member that they really want to use resources to pursue, but may not be something that's kind of part of the strategic plan or part of what the rest of the board wants to do. So those things would kind of be required to go through this process. And then if they do get the necessary votes, if it's something that is super interesting to the board and they do want the staff to pursue, then the planning committee can discuss and determine timing for when it goes on the agenda. So to address Director Seta's concern that it not just kind of show up on an agenda without sufficient timing for staff to really actually evaluate and come up with a comprehensive staff report on the issue.
That's it.
Unless the action motion carries a given time frame already.
Sure, yeah, right, okay.
Yes, but I also don't want it to usurp the business of the district that we already have timed and already agendized and have importance, and it shouldn't come. We're dealing with something that we already have planned. So I like it. Figure out if it needs to be on the regular agenda or if it needs to be about if it needs to go on our planning committee agenda. So yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, and I can build that into the language, right? I can build into the language where appropriate, timing, scheduling of the agenda item will go to the planning committee. Leaving some, that where appropriate, I think will give sufficient, if it's really obvious that it, you want a report on an election that's coming up. Obviously the timing for that is kind of set by when the election is, or something along those lines. But I think I kind of understand.
Because the board of directors may or may not send something over to a committee, right? They may just want to skip that and just say, I want this, and if 3 board members say yes, then it gets done. But
I get it, okay.
Because again, some board members were just putting things on there and never getting anywhere, and
right.
But the board members still need to be able to have access to agendizing items in case the GM says no, and because the agenda gets made by the GM working alongside the president. So if neither one of them wants to put something up, then another board member should be able to put something up.
So, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the motion to put the item on the agenda can direct the timing for consideration or can send the item to the planning committee for determination of when it shows up on a future agenda.
Yeah,
okay.
That works.
You might want to not call it the planning committee and just say committee, because just to keep sometimes things have changed, or just say maybe the appropriate committee.
I just wrote those words, appropriate
Yeah,
committee.
the vernacular might change.
Okay, okay, all right. Okay, anything else on future agenda items?
I'm good. I'm good.
Consent is another big change, but really this is just a best practice and needs to stay in. You have to use consent more liberally.
Leah, can I make one comment? It is a change to the policy, but it's not much of a change to the practice, because the district long ago changed this practice, and I didn't even realize that the consent calendar item was there until more recently. So there's, just so you know, that there's a limit right now that says that items over $15,000 have to be on the action calendar. We haven't followed that rule since I've been here for almost 4.5 years. So just so you know, we haven't been practicing it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Although then, see, I was thinking that's why your meetings were so long, but apparently that is not.
It's not.
And under the consent calendar, the city of Richmond, for anyone to move an item out of the consent calendar, their process has either a council member or general public, because anyone can remove something from the consent calendar to speak on it. Before they're allowed to speak on it, they have to say whether they spoke to the staff member responsible for that item. Have they exhausted getting their answers before pulling that item? Right.
So the reason, the city has that, my understanding, I do a fair amount of work for the city, is that people will just ask that stuff be pulled off consent just to pull it off consent. Not because it's even an issue that they care that much about, but that's, sometimes there's distrust about consent, whatever. I don't think we need a sort of that sort of requirement here. I'm assuming you don't have a ton of public at your meetings, but
We
maybe
don't, but some of the directors, I think, sometimes take things out. I mean, anybody's free to take it out, but I just want to make sure that maybe, I don't know, maybe do we add something? Because I have, we have gone to meetings where people look around and go, oh, I thought this was not controversial. And it's,
right.
2 hours later, we're still talking about this item we pulled from the consent calendar.
Maybe something about, maybe to address like pulling the consent isn't for just like a simple clarification of like, I don't understand what this word means, or I don't like this word, or maybe it's some language that would address like, if you pull something off consent, it's because there's something substantial that needs to be discussed, or you disagree with the recommendation, or I don't know, something to that effect. Is that what you're trying to address? Not just that it gets pulled for like a minor thing.
Yeah, because then we go into this rabbit hole, and then people pick it apart. And then, again, I've seen the meetings go so long, especially a year ago, right?
Yeah.
So maybe what we could do, maybe if we add some language that says, before pulling an item off consent, prior to pulling an item off consent, a director should attempt to resolve or address any questions that they have with staff in advance. I guess that's what you were talking about they do for the city of Richmond. Yeah. Okay, so I take it back. That is probably a good idea given the issue that you're describing. I was kind of thinking about it a little differently, but we can add that guidance in there. I mean, at the end of the day, if a board member wants to pull something off consent, or for the public, they can do it. I mean, it's a way to make meetings go long. It's a way to use the process strategically. But I do think we can add some guidance in here that just says, directors are encouraged to address non-substantive concerns about consent items with the general manager prior to the meeting. Because nothing about that violates the Brown Act. And it does allow for small issues to be addressed without getting caught in the rabbit hole.
And then do we or should we also add, similar to the city of Richmond, whenever somebody pulls a consent calendar, actually anybody, and then goes to the end of the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
We don't have that specified right now.
Okay,
So
do you want to have that in there?
Yeah, so that way it's like, really, you want to talk about this? It's going to go all the way to the end. Let's finish all the, we're here to meet, because it went into the consent calendar because it's supposed to be non-controversial. Hopefully it's been looked at already. So let's pull it at the end. And then
that clarification would be helpful. I always wondered about that too, because I'm used to it being at the end as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good practical way to manage pulling stuff off consent strategically, especially since the very next section that you have is a timeline for when you adjourn.
Yeah, because if the meetings go till 10 o'clock, and now we're going to go back to that consent calendar item.
Yeah, somebody might say,
put it back in. I'm going to go home.
Okay.
Well, I will say that the only time I think that you might want to be careful with that, so I would say use language that says something like, unless otherwise agreed upon, because sometimes you do have consent items that may be pulled and you have a guest who's there to speak about that consent item. So you may not want to just have a blanket rule that if something's pulled off consent, it always goes to the end if you have a long meeting that's being planned. I saw that happen in Richmond, and I was there at midnight when somebody was there from LA to speak about the sewer plan, and they were not happy that it got pushed to the end. So I think we want to be careful when you make that blanket.
No, you're right. That's a good idea. I think we can build in some process for that. That maybe what I'll say is items pulled off consent go to the end of the agenda. If a board member wishes for the item to be heard earlier, they can make a motion for it to be heard earlier, and with approval of 3 members, then that item will be heard next, or something like that.
Unless otherwise agreed, or something like that. I mean, even.
Well, let me ask you this question, because again, I don't have the benefit of sort of knowing how your board functions, and so I would suggest unless otherwise agreed, right? Because then you can just have an informal discussion about
what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But do you feel like that's enough, or that you need to formalize it in order to avoid problems?
I think that seems reasonable. We don't have
Okay.
too many controversies over.
No,
We
we
really
don't.
actually don't have, like, people really haven't pulled consent because there's a major controversial. It's usually because there are like some minor questions or things like that that probably could have just been handled differently. So
Yeah, I pulled it, and I usually pull it because I got a question over the money. If I pull it, it's money. But
so
I
that's
think
a different, not a little clarification though.
that's not a clarification. It's usually something
Yeah.
that's bigger. But I think
Yeah.
you can say, unless otherwise agreed by a vote of 3 members of the board. You can say it that easily. I don't think we have to make it big, but I think it's, we usually can agree pretty quickly. But
Okay.
I do think.
Yeah, Lisa, I've been quiet
Yeah.
the whole time here, but I
Andrew.
would like to step in on this one just briefly. I completely agree with Director Sudduth in that if you have it, leave a mechanism there to bring it to the front. But the other way that consent items get pulled is if 2 members of the public choose to speak on the issue or some method like that. And if you have people actually coming out to the board meeting and wanting to speak on an item and it gets pulled, and then you tell them it has to go to the end of the agenda, that is really not in good faith, I don't think, with the public.
Yeah.
And so that's how a lot of the consent items I've seen at council meetings get pulled. I know we don't generally have that here, but I wouldn't want to put something in there that's rigid like that would penalize the public from actually turning out, wanting to speak on an item that happened to be on consent, and then they need to go to the end.
So maybe what we could do to address that is, and I'm sort of typing this out now, is basically say items pulled off consent by board members will go to the end of the agenda unless otherwise agreed upon by a vote of 3 members of the board. Items pulled off consent due to a request from the public or a request from 2 members of the public will be addressed as the next agenda item.
I think that would solve it. I just
think
don't
that's
want some mechanism to try to control board action
Sure.
that you end up impeding the public's access.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Andrew.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you,
I'll
Andrew.
be quiet again.
Appreciate that.
Leah,
Does that happen with the-
Andrew is our deputy general manager. I don't think you guys have met, so.
No. Hi, Andrew.
No, because that
Sorry,
did
Leah.
happen with the PLA, and I think that's really important. Because
Okay.
that's really important. Thank you.
Okay, so section 5.7, we're going to remove, consistent with kind of beefing up the discussion of process.
Yeah.
5.8, this is another place where we made some changes. Functionally, really what we did to 5.8 was just say that let me just get to the right part of my...
Before you do that, can we back up a little bit?
Yep.
The other one before
Uh-huh.
5.6.
Oh, sorry, I skipped right by that.
Yeah.
Adjournment, right, yes.
Yeah, I like the adjournment after 30 minutes. Cesar,
That will definitely not go over well with the public.
I like the recommendation.
You want an option A and an option B?
Yes.
Yes.
How can we get there?
I don't do this a lot because I'm a litigator and I never really want to promise results, but I promise you, once these policies are implemented and we do a training on them, your meetings will get shorter. I can't guarantee how much shorter, but I will guarantee you that they will get somewhat shorter, because usually meetings are long because people don't fully understand what they're supposed to do at a given time, and so they just interject in the moment. If you could take out even 20% of that, you'll cut time out of your meetings.
We will be heroes. Cesar.
Most of it is about process, where we get caught up. It's very rarely content. It's usually process.
We will be heroes. Sorry. Okay, I just wanted to see that one. I just wanted to see it. I just like it. That's okay. We can keep going. We're gonna take out 5.7.
Yeah, and then 5.8, we're basically amending it to remove the requirement for the engineering service managers to attend board meetings unless requested by the GM. Basically, it's designed to say the general counsel attends, the general manager attends, and then anyone else that attends at the request either of the board or the GM.
So just to clarify, that's an old title. So Leah's referring to infrastructure and planning. It had a requirement that all the department heads used to attend, and we're just saying that they'll only attend by request. All the department heads are at this point requested to attend anyway, but they don't have to be there at every meeting.
I thought they always attended because you told them to attend. So.
They do attend because it's been our practice, and they will continue, but it's just they don't have to be at every one in the policy. That shouldn't be stated.
I think it's
that they like to be with us. I said that. I thought they just like being with us. That's what they attended.
They probably like being with you for the first hour and maybe even the first hour and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5.9, we have not made any changes to. The next place where we've sort of changed is 5.10. Oh wait, hold on, I might have this wrong.
Can I just read 5.9 really quickly?
Oh, and we did make a change to 5.9. My apologies. We added, we changed the requirement that people get permission of the presiding officer and fill out a speaker card to speak, which was in the existing policy. It's just not good practice. I mean, you want to encourage people to fill out a speaker card, but if someone shows up and they haven't filled out a card and they sort of raise their hand and say they want to speak, you should let them speak. So we removed this kind of additional process that was in your original policy.
Director Cepeda, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to read it. To see if anything else changed. Do we want to put in here what we added to the agenda template, Lisa, where if people want, if they need accommodations, ADA accommodations, or not?
I wouldn't put that in your policy.
Okay.
Putting language like that in your policy just invite. I mean, you want to have it on your agendas, but it's a legal requirement, right? I mean, it's a requirement of the ADA. So there's an assumption that you have to comply with all laws. That's why your agenda says that. This is a document for the board, not for the public. So
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary.
Perfect. Then everything else looks good. Thank you.
3 minutes. Okay.
Okay, so 5.10, that is where we just added section 4. Wait, I'm just looking. It says we added section 4.6, but that is clearly not right. That is clearly a typo on my part. I know we added back in the decorum section. I don't think we made any changes to it. Justin, can you scroll down a little bit?
I think there were some things in here that we reworded to be a little more general because we couldn't really say it in the specifics, like the attire and things like that. So
yeah,
I think those were the changes here. It was sort of just be mindful that the meetings are being recorded and that type of thing.
Okay. Any other questions on the decorum? They're pretty self-explanatory.
Can we just go up really quickly to the top of this section? I just didn't read the other ones. I just want to see what else changed, if anything.
I don't think we changed anything here from our last planning committee.
No, you just add the optics of recorded meetings while the
Okay.
meetings. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so for the committee section, again, this largely mirrors what was there before. The one change that we made is that we wanted to make clear that standing committees don't have to have a quorum of board members, and to clarify the establishment of standing committees and to address procedures for when a quorum of directors attend the standing subcommittee meeting. So basically, you know, committees typically are comprised of 2, so there's not a quorum. And this is kind of consistent, I think, with what's happening here, right? If other members attend, then they attend in a listening capacity, as opposed to in a decision-making capacity, so that you don't have a quorum.
Listening, does that also mean they can participate in any way without voting on it, or is it just strictly listening?
I believe if you can scroll down, I think it addresses that. Just keep, I think it's like 6.1.6 maybe. Hold on, there it might be there. Okay, so
Well, 6.1.3 does talk a little bit about a quorum. Just so that they should advise the general manager who will notice, so we can notice appropriately. So this section was, if there is an intention, we need to notice it differently as a special meeting versus as a committee meeting.
I think the intent was to rewrite this section so that a committee could be a committee, which is there are 2 members only. We kept a provision that if there's a circumstance in which 3 end up being there, this is what will need to happen, but we need to know in advance so we can do it, versus our current practices, which allows, we have to notice everything as a committee meeting as a special meeting because historically board members have all wanted to participate. So I think that was the change that we wrote.
Okay, sorry, briefly distracted by some house issues.
All right, wait a minute. So,
Do we want to put anything there that, like, what? I'm just trying to figure out because this is a current process, we just never followed it. But if somebody does want to notify the GM and they notify the chair, I want to join because I want to participate. Like, what is do we want to set up a protocol like the WISE? Just randomly somebody can just join anytime? Should there be a reason why? Because otherwise.
I mean, I will be honest, this is something I've never really seen before. That other members of a board, I mean, that non-committee members would request to attend a committee meeting. And so that you'd have like a whole process around that. I mean, committees are meant to be committees for a reason. I mean, and committees don't typically make permanent decisions. They make recommendations that then get ruled on or that get voted on by the full board. I mean, I don't know if yours are different, but like this is a good example. I mean, we're going to spend all this time making determination, recommendations, revisions, et cetera, to these policies and procedures. Ideally, the committee then makes a report to the board about all the work you've done, all the time you've spent, all of the information you've gathered, et cetera. You make a recommendation to approve as presented with discussion on like these 4 items of controversy, and then the board kind of addresses it that way. So, I mean, but if your practice is, I mean, it's a hard practice to get out of. I mean, if it's a common occurrence where other board members decide they want to attend a committee meeting, I don't know that you can say that they can't. Like I said, it's just not something I've seen before. So I've never seen language like this in a policy because it's just not something. When a committee structure is robust, as y'all's is, the committees function as committees. They don't function as ways to add additional board meetings.
It's been an ongoing issue since I got here, and different GMs have tried different things at different times to really get the committees to be committees. And I think the board really just has to decide if the desire is to have a committee structure. You got to have a committee structure, and you have to just keep to that committee structure. I mean, it's not as if the board doesn't get an opportunity, but if you're not going to do that, then we would have to continue to create them as special meetings, and you're just having all these special meetings. So I think it's something that the board has to commit to if it's really something you want to use, or get rid of the committees and just have all these special board meetings. That would be a better way to do it, frankly.
I think part of this might be because as a board director, we are sort of, in a way, need to attend about 6 meetings a month. So some board of directors might want to attend all of these because they're just meetings that we can attend. And it's just maybe clarifying you can attend them, but you'll be an observer.
Well, do y'all have a process, a liaison process, whereby like members of the board are assigned to attend other public meetings and then report back?
Yeah.
Because usually that's how you can get those extra meetings. I mean, again, to put it bluntly, if the goal is to just get enough meetings in a month, well, it's more useful, frankly, for you to go to the Richmond City Council meeting or to, the relevant water district meeting and then report back to the board about what happened at that meeting. I mean, and again, I have a limited view of your board and kind of the way it operates. I have seen, like, for example, Lisa, do y'all meet once a month or twice a month?
Twice.
Yeah, so you're already meeting twice a month. I mean, so, one of my clients, they had this issue and their committees just weren't working for a variety of reasons. And so they had their first board meeting was general business, and then their second board meeting of the month was a planning and programs meeting that essentially identified a particular committee issue, right? So if it was finance, it'd be planning and programs finance. If it was operations, it'd be planning and programs operations. Again, I don't know what your committee structure is, but my general recommendation is, as Lisa said, if you have committees, and the committees conduct business with 2 members, and within the ambit of their responsibilities, the members are assigned or voted on by the rest of the board, or just have special meetings. I mean, otherwise you just add probably unnecessary process.
We've tried every structure possible. We used to have 4
Yeah.
committee meetings a month. Each one met every other week. We had the 2 board meetings, then we got rid of the committee meetings and tried the 2 meetings a month that had focus, and we went to 1 board meeting a month, and so we tried every structure. It's really just the board committing to what they want to do and then sticking with it.
Right. So it sounds like then then we just need to kind of keep this language in there, right? Which is that, you know, the requirement for a member to attend in anything other than a listening capacity is that they alert the GM so that the meeting can be noticed as a general meeting or a special meeting. And if they don't, then they can only attend as an observer.
There's also on the meeting points, like directors can get meeting attending. I mean, it's fairly, I mean,
Lisa, you're cutting off for me. I don't know if you're getting cut off for everybody else.
Yeah.
Can you hear me any better?
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
Okay. So you get 3 meetings automatically from the 2 board meetings and meeting with the GM once a month. That's 3, and you could attend 3. You can attend 3 other webinars, training too. So, I mean, if that's the issue, I would suggest, as Leah is saying, that we figure something else out and really keep these committees. And it sounds like, from what I've heard recently, the desire of the majority of the board is to keep the committees as committees and only have 2 members participate. Even if you listen, that's one thing, but not participate in the discussion. So.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Okay, that's a good recommendation.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we leave the policy as is, and then this is just something we'll focus on in the training.
Sure.
And if we can get to a place where the practice kind of conforms with what we're recommending, then it's easy enough to amend the policy, right? I mean, we don't have to do this big, huge rewrite. You can easily make modest adjustments to the policy. We just did that for one of my clients where, we decided certain things could be changed. We just make modest adjustments to their bylaws. But I think until you know that you have board buy-in, better to keep the option in the policy so that they can see that as an option.
The other thing too, that I don't know where it is in this policy, but it does say that if we have quorum, then the president of the board has to open up that meeting with quorum and then passes it back to the chair to lead that committee. So, right, we have to just make the directors know that if we're going to make quorum in any committee meeting, the president's going to have to be put in here. Otherwise, what happens then?
Well, if the president's there. If the president's there. Yeah.
Well, and that's what we've actually tried to address with the way that we've revised this, is to say that if that member does not alert the president in advance, or the GM in advance, then they can only participate as an observer. So there is not a quorum. So, I mean, that really is designed to get at that, so that you don't have a committee meeting where someone shows up and wants to, and then you have to change the whole structure of the meeting on the fly. It hasn't been noticed properly, etc. So the one thing this policy is meant to make very clear is if you just decide today that you want to attend this meeting, which is fine, right? I mean, you want to know what's going on, etc. Then you attend as an observer. You are just a listener. You are not a participant. And then that obviates the need to adjust the way the meeting is conducted.
Okay.
Great.
That works.
Okay, anything else on committees?
Not for me.
Do you have something there for the ad hoc committees?
I believe there's just a section that says that you can create ad hoc committees.
Okay.
Yeah. we made a change to section 7. It's just a compliance with the law thing. We removed the requirement that digital audio records be deleted unless there is a legal necessity for retention. That's not what we typically do, so better not to have it as a requirement. And frankly, it's not something that should be in the board policies. If that's a retention of documents is a staff responsibility. Okay, so any other questions on the, I mean, this is all pretty basic stuff. The one thing notable, it's not different from what you've said before, is that 7.3. And this was already in there, but again, when we do a training, I'll point this out, is that, you know, you can't ask that stuff be included in the minutes that wasn't talked about at the meeting. It has to be comments pertinent to an agenda item that were actually brought up at the meeting where the item was discussed. In other words, you can't change the record. I mean, the record is what it is. So there's some, you know, it's not an exact science because someone's preparing those minutes, but this is just to alert board members that if you read the minutes and you think something's missing, and then it's like, well, it's because it wasn't said, you can't just add that to the minutes. So, okay, so I'm gonna drop my phone. Section 8. This is all just restructured, but the content is exactly the same. And I already see some minor formatting problems, but we will deal with those. But the substance of this is identical, so no changes from the last meeting.
Actually, Leah, I have a question for you. In our policy here in 8.2.2, I think down almost toward the bottom, it says if the director doesn't notify district clerk about the compensation, we have it now, I think it said $100 before, we have it now set to basically what the current rate, the current maximum rate is for directors. Is that a policy? Is that illegal? What can you put there? Is that fine?
Yeah.
I don't know. It used to be $100. I don't know what that 100 was for.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this was a change that was kind of made before I picked it back up, so this was in the last version. But my guess is that you all have presumably have a resolution that establishes the amount you get paid per meeting, and so this just matches that. Okay, so that's okay. Yeah. They just had an old number in there, and I didn't know if that was a legal number or maybe just because this isn't been updated for a million years. Okay. Right. Yeah. So that's the current number. So that'll just give you an idea of how long ago it was updated. I have $100 probably at least 10 years. So yeah. Okay. So this is Lisa, was this in the last draft? I couldn't tell if this was something that was in. Yeah. So this is the same as what was in the last draft. It's a communications, but it is different than the existing policy. So it's just a communication policy designed to provide guidance to board members about how they communicate with the public and to be careful about not communicating on behalf of the board when they're really just communicating about their own opinion on something. I mean, as you all know as board members, there's always this balance between you as a representative of a board and you as an individual citizen with free speech rights. And so so you can speak on things as yourself, but you have to be careful about making sure that those comments are attributed to you as an individual, not you as a representative of the board. So this again is a best practice policy that we have, that's been vetted. We've adopted it, I think, in 4 of our sanitary districts. And I think it works really well to provide you sufficient freedom, but also to ensure that you don't kind of end up speaking for the board inadvertently and causing consternation for folks that might have a different opinion and don't believe that's the position of the board. We can spend more time on this, but again, this I think is something that you went over in the last meeting and was kind of left intact in the agreement. Yes. Or in the agreement, in the policy. Same thing with section 10. And again, Lisa, this was something I know we added. I believe this was in the policy the last time you looked at it. This is meant to sort of provide the kind of key components of the board's responsibilities regarding budget and information that the board needs to have and understand about the budgeting process. So I made a lot of organizational changes to this in order to make it really clear, but substantively, it's not different than what was in the last version.
Right. I think from 9 on, there were no changes with the exception of adding back the section 12, which was the conflict with the law, which just dropped out from the main meeting.
And I don't remember where it was, but we took out the section on district travel or director travel. That was in the last,
That was in the version before May, though.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I thought we took it out. Wait, did we put it back in?
No, there was a whole list of very detailed.
I see, okay.
It's just one little paragraph.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, which is great. You just reference your resolution, which has
Correct.
more detail. So, and we are finally at the end. But I think this has been super helpful. I mean, I know long meetings can be difficult, but I have some really, I feel like the changes that we've made are going to be good, are really going to help. So
honestly, I had this on my calendar till 9 o'clock. So you're doing
all right.
You're doing fine. You're half an hour earlier than I thought it would be. So okay, so let me check something. Conflict with law. Can you scroll up a little bit? Yeah, director travel. No, down, sorry. I just want to see director travel.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
All right. Amended. Amended, revised, or replaced?
At the very top.
Yeah, it's because it says director travel policies are governed as that resolution may be amended, revised, or replaced. They're not just amended.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, right, okay.
Be amended, revised, or replaced.
Okay.
And conflict with law, I think that's fine. Is 12 the last one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask about that there when you're done, Director Sutter or Vice President Sutter?
Sure, go ahead. I'm done. I just wanted the word revised. I'm good.
So should we list the resolution number in case we go back and we update the travel policy? Then we have to come back and update this policy. Is it a circular? By listing other policies on this policy, should we just be generic and direct the travel policies are governed by the travel policy? See the travel policy, like super generic and not a resolution number.
I always list the resolution, but I don't know.
And just because, again, because we're changing all these policies right now, that if we were to adopt this policy now and then the next one is going to be directed, I don't know if it is, but let's say it is travel policy. We adopt that one next month, but now this one's become outdated. Do we have to come back to this one again?
Yeah, I see your point.
It does, and this is actually a lot of reasons why some of these things, when you put too much in here, they become out of date and you have to go back and revise them and they don't stay current. So in general, it would be better to not have to do that because if the policy, I don't know if there's a way to just
I think we
do
can just
something
say,
different.
I think we can just say director travel policies are governed by resolution.
Okay, yeah.
Where where there's a conflict between these policies and any resolution, the resolution will govern. I think that's enough to remove the specifics. So.
Can we do that in the other sections too, like the GM resolution? I think there's referenced, and if there's another reference, because then we don't have to update any of the resolution numbers if those things change.
Yeah, and the only place where I would suggest we don't do that is the stuff on compensation.
I don't know. Can't you just give it a resolution number without the year in front of it?
Yeah, but it won't be the same. If we revise it.
That's the official number.
But I've always done. No, I've always done it this way, where we have like, we'll have like a board policy and then you give it, you amend the actual policy itself by the year. But the policy, the resolution is 57. But
that might be why the way yours are structured.
But that's what I mean. But what I'm saying is, this is our opportunity to structure it in such a way that the resolution itself or the policy itself is structured not by the year number, but by an actual number, and then you're amending it each year. Because I think it's more confusing not to have a resolution number in these policies.
No,
I don't think. Oh, go ahead, Leah. No, go ahead.
I definitely understand what you're saying, and you're right that not including a resolution number kind of trades off with clarity. But it's a very difficult bell to unring when you have a well-established process for numbering resolutions, right? So you've been doing it this way, which is the standard way of doing it for some years, right? So there's no real way that you can kind of start over with one and then just start numbering without years. I mean, people do that with ordinances, you know, where they don't have years on them in the same way. That's a more common practice, but resolutions are typically include the year. And from looking at this, it looks like you have quite a few. I mean, if you had at least 57 in 2019, I think the best way to sort of address this issue is not so much to, I think we can take out the reference to resolution 2019-57, but perhaps every election cycle, and a lot of we do this for a lot of our clients, every election cycle, the board is provided with a binder that has these bylaws and then all of the current policies that they reference, so that in one place you sort of have all that information. So while you're correct that it's not as clear on the face of the resolution, or I mean on the face of the bylaws, ideally every 2 years you will be provided with a binder that has the most updated information in it, so you will be able to access it. And it's not a perfect solution, but I think changing the way you number resolutions at this point is probably not something that it would open up a true can of worms. I mean, it would really be very difficult to implement.
And it would be an electronic binder?
Yeah, sure. It could just be a PDF. It doesn't have to be paper.
Yes, no paper.
Just a linked PDF.
We don't cut trees here no more.
That's good. You know, I realized from working from home, this is one of my biggest holdouts. I have trouble with electronics. I just need the paper. But in any event, but yeah, but on this issue, absolutely, we can just do a PDF. You know, this is something, Lisa, you can work with your general counsel for. As I said, we do it. I mean, certainly for our city clients, not as much for our special district clients, because a lot of times the members don't change. But you certainly can just adopt a practice whereby every 2 years you get an updated PDF with a date on it that has these policies and then all of the resolutions they reference in one place hyperlinked. And so, you know, then it's super clear what applies. So some other useful material. I mean, I think there's other useful stuff that it's good for board members to kind of have at their disposal. So key ordinances, good for you to know what the key ordinances are, that kind of thing.
Okay.
All right.
So just a logistics question. Are you comfortable enough that if we make these changes that we should bring it to the board, or do you want to try to bring this back one more time in July to this committee before it goes to the board, which means it probably wouldn't go to the board until August?
Lisa, is that a question for whom?
The committee. The
Yeah,
ad hoc,
for
the
directors.
planning.
Yeah.
For you guys.
I can go either way. I'd rather get this done with sooner than later.
I mean, I think these changes are pretty easy to implement, and I mean, I would recommend, unless you have strong feelings otherwise, one of the challenges with amending policies is that you really can amend them to death. I mean, you can just keep going back and forth and back and forth. I would really recommend that we get this scheduled for a board meeting. We will make these changes. With those changes, the committee will sort of recommend approval with these few options where there's an A and a B option. and then let the board have a broader discussion about it and see if we can't get them adopted and then move to a training.
I would echo Leah's recommendation as well.
No, and we're getting ready to go into a new fiscal year. I would rather get it done sooner rather than later myself, personally.
Okay.
And I mean, the sooner you can get it to us, if we can get it into, I mean, I know July board meeting is coming up pretty fast and we've got some strategic planning things to do, but if we can get it in that August meeting, let's get it done.
Well, we probably can bring it to we might even be able to bring it to the first July meeting, but probably more likely the second July meeting.
Fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that.
Fine with me. I know very quick, Director Stanley's here is sitting as an audience member. So I do want to give public comment because we're here. We have public comment and we have a public member. So,
Are you asking me to talk?
yes, you can speak now. Do you have public comment? Because we are at the end of this and I do want to give you the opportunity to speak. Did you have comment?
Well, I'm totally confused now. So we did say that we wanted only 2 people at a committee who could talk, and now we have a way to go back to if there's 3 people or more, everybody could talk. So are we finalizing that somehow?
We've always had a process for that. It's not that this is a new process. We're just, the discussion was, and the desire that was expressed previously was to not, because there's a process, if it occurs, the desire though was to keep the committees as 2 members of the public, but really it's not changing in that way. It's just been restructured.
Okay, well, that's why I didn't talk tonight. But, and from my time here, yes, Lisa's absolutely correct. We go back and forth. I mean, it used to be all 5 directors went to every planning meeting, and we had 2 planning committees, and they met twice a month. So, you know, to now where it's not that way. So it just goes back and forth just in a short period I've been on the board. The only thing, there was a couple things that I was text messaging people. Sorry for that. There's a conflict on the, let me see if I can find it now. I was making notes as we were talking.
Point 1.4.
Yeah, there was one thing where the if the board president, I forget, board president says, I want these people to be appointed to a committee, but then the board doesn't approve, then in the next section it said, well then, I think it's 6.2, then it says, well, if the board doesn't approve whoever the board president wanted on a committee, then the board president could just appoint whoever he or she wants regardless. It's like, wait a minute. That's not what it says previously. So I'm just putting that out for Leah to look for.
And I'm sorry, you're talking this. Can you move up to the section, Justin, so I can see it?
Okay, you see where the very last sentence.
6.2. The last sentence here.
Right. Okay.
See, membership of all committees, blah, 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 approved by a majority of the board. But if the board doesn't approve, then the board president can do it. And that takes away from our idea that every director, regardless of president or vice president, has the same powers. So now we're giving the president some powers.
Well, I think the issue is that there are circumstances where you just wouldn't get a majority. You know, so you'd have like 2-2-1. So you have to have a way to break that tie. And so as typically that would be the board president, right? So they kind of step in. Yeah.
I don't think our board is that split up. It's not a big deal. We're talking about ad hoc or committee.
Right, in
So,
which case then this provision would never come into play, right? So if they are approved by a majority of the board, then that is how the process will go forward. It's only if that doesn't happen, so if there is a conflict, that's when the board president steps in. I think that's how the language is drafted.
well,
makes
again, it's giving the board president some power that he or she did not have previously. If the majority of the board does not approve something, then you're saying, well, too bad, board, we're not going to listen to you. We're going to give that power to the...
That was there before. That's not a new policy,
Right.
Director Stanley. That was there, and that's part of the original policy.
Okay.
And again, just to provide some clarity, like I mean, this is a pretty typical concept in municipal law, which is that you have to have someone to break the log jam. I mean, so, you know, if the board can't reach a decision, and that's kind of why this is designed that way. So if the board can't reach a decision, you still need to have committee members. And the board can't reach a decision based on the structure that you set up. There has to be a way to kind of move past that barrier. So it's not about really giving the president more power. It's about creating one person who is responsible for kind of getting past the logjam. And again, I mean, you see this all the time.
No, I understand. I understand. One of the things that I want to commend you on, Leah, is this is my 4th year, and it's kind of silly to think that I'm one of the old timers, but people who were before us had certain opinions of how things were done, and we were just told, and we weren't really trained, and we still haven't really gone through a training because it seems like we constantly have some sort of commotion going on, like a pandemic. Oh my gosh. So things like how things go on an agenda, it's like, wow, okay, it's taken 4 years, and I've been told different things up until now, and now it's like, oh, why am I just getting this clearly explained? So it's been frustrating, and so thank you for making this more clear.
My pleasure. I mean, I take really seriously, this is something that's part of why I do what I do, to help elected boards do their job better. You know, I mean, you're all in this for service. I mean, very few people are on the board of a sanitary district or the board of a small city, you know, for all the power and prestige, right? You know, you're on it to provide, you know, for...
Excuse me, it's very prestigious to be on the waste board.
Well, you know,
so in any event, I mean, for me, it's important to kind of help leaders be better leaders, right? I mean, that's part of, I think, the job of it should be the job of your council, to help you use the law effectively to effectuate the policies that you determine are right for the district. So yeah, really happy to help and excited to do the training with y'all, because I feel like this really, the rubber meets the road when we do an actual training. When we're not just kind of looking at words on paper, but we're talking about how does this actually work in practice. So.
And just a final thing. Cesar, like I said, the whole board used to attend all these committee meetings when I first started. And the reason was so much discussion takes place during these committee meetings. And by hearing and participating in that discussion, when we actually got to the board meetings, we didn't have to talk that much. So that's why everybody went. It wasn't necessarily to get their meanings in. It was just because we were all nosy and wanted to know what was going on. So thank
you. That's pretty good. Thank you. Yeah. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
Justin and Lisa, just one quick question. If you could send me any notes that you took, that would be great. I definitely took notes, but I'm just looking at them and they are cryptic in places, so it'd be good to put together other notes. So.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. It was really great to meet all of y'all. We'll turn this around pretty quickly. And then, Lisa, I'll just wait for you to let me know when you want to take this to the board.
Okay. We're going to shoot for either first or second meeting in July.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Leah. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It was,
Looking
like I
forward
said, it was great to meet you all, and
Yeah.
I will see you when we do the training, hopefully in August.
Yes, it was indeed our pleasure.
And then you can hold me to my guarantee that your meetings will get shorter after that, at least a little bit.
Oh, believe me, I will.
We get our money back if we go over 30 minutes.
I never said that they would get down to 30 minutes, but just shorter. 5 minutes is all it takes. No,
Shorter,
no, I'm
shorter.
kidding. It'll be more than 5 minutes, so. All
Totally
right.
appreciate you. Totally appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
everyone. Thank you
Great
very much for your time.
Bye.
You guys have a good night. Bye.
Thanks, you too.
Good night. Miss Gina, next board item.
Yep. Number 6 is matters from staff/general manager. A, reports on issues or matters pertaining to the work of the committee.
I don't think we have anything.
Okay. May I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Number 7, matters from members of the board. Reports on issues pertaining to the work of the committee.
Director Zepeda.
We've already said it all. I'm just waiting for the adjournment part. I was about to hang up.
Thank you.
I was about to
Sarah.
hang up too. I forgot.
I so appreciate. This is why I appreciate you so much. I have nada. Please, Miss Gina, continue.
Item B is future agenda items, informal observations and inquiries regarding the business of the district or requests for placement of items of interest on a future agenda.
Director Zepeda.
Take over the world. Other than that, no. Just kidding. No future agenda items.
Okay. I do
No,
not
that's fine.
have any. I do not have any. I do not believe we received any at the last board meeting. GM, receive any?
We don't have anything right now, but you know, it's a changing world. Things come up. So I will definitely communicate with you if we have anything. We have other policies that we're working on and bringing forward. So I'm sure by then we'll have something.
So
If not, we'll.
good. And we're all just on the edge of our seat waiting for the next item.
The last item is the adjournment.
Yes.
Please. Thank
Thank
you
you
guys
all.
very much. Great meeting. Great meeting. Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
We accomplished a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Appreciate
you.
Have a good night, everybody.
thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.